Hi everybody, welcome to Tomato Junkie's Kitchen, also known as Sarah's Kitchen. We're going to do the pecan pie. First I wanted to show you, after I showed you the pastry the other day, how I finish the edge of a pie crust, and I usually do it the same way whether it's a 1 or a 2 crust pie. The only difference would be if I had a 2 crust pie, I would probably use a little bit of water along the edge of the crust to get it to stick together. But in this case, I don't need to do that. And I just do something very simple like this, as you can see, and that just finishes it. And you can tell by looking at that, because it's not perfect, which I like that, when it's not perfect. You can tell this is not a store-bought crust. Okay, this is something that somebody made. So I'm going to put this in the fridge while I'm showing you the rest. You can also put it in the freezer. There's nothing wrong with putting it in the freezer, because remember, when you're making pastry, it's make it cold, cook it hot. That's the little mantra you go by as far as that goes. And then I wanted to show you with the other piece of the pastry how you roll one out. And I got started so you wouldn't have to watch me do the whole thing. But you want to roll in one direction from the center, because if you do this thing, it tends to toughen up the crust. Okay, so you don't go from the middle, and then what I do is I usually turn it from the middle, turn it, and then you just keep going until it's the size that you want it to be. And as you can see, this is pretty easy to work with. All I did was I got it out about 20 minutes before I started to use it, because I had refrigerated it. And when it's refrigerated, it will get pretty firm and maybe even a little bit too firm to work with. But that's how you do it. And then also the bench scraper can be really helpful as far as if you get any sticky spots, you can slide that under there and get that out of there. So, and then also the pastry brush. It helps you get any excess flour off. Like I would fold this over, and if I saw like a whole lot of excess flour, I just brush that off, because it could just toughen up your crust a little bit. Another thing, when you're trimming off the edge of your pie crust, here's the trusty kitchen shears, okay? And another thing those do, if I didn't mention this before, see these teeth along here? We have trouble opening the Karo syrup. That that cap was on so tight, we had trouble opening it. So this thing, you put it on there, it's really helpful. And then you can use the scissors to trim the edge of the pie crust, any excess that you have. So it's a really, really neat tool to have. The other ingredients, of course, I put in the comments. Today I'm going to use a cup of the whole pecans and a cup of the chopped pecans. I kind of like that combination because it fills up like every bit of the pie. So you don't just have, pieces with open spaces in it. I don't think a cup is enough pecans for a pie. A lot of people just use a cup. But I don't think that that's enough. I think it takes 2 cups. You might be able to get away with a cup and a half, but I would definitely use, at least that much in making the pie. You can also wait, and you'll see when I go ahead and put the mixture into the pie shell, that I'm going to put the pecans in first, and they eventually float to the top. If you want to make some type of decorative thing, you can do that. Another thing that you can do is they do make actual cutters that are for pies. This is a maple leaf. They make all kinds of ones. This one's just kind of fall themed. And then what you could do is just put that, over the pie. So there's all kinds of things you can do as far as making designs for pies. And that's really something that your kids would enjoy, especially on a double crust pie, for those of you that have children and you want to cook with them. So anyway, I did go ahead, and the recipe says beat these eggs until they look a little bit frothy, and you can see that these do. It's always best to work with room temperature ingredients whenever you can, unless your recipe calls for something cold, like when we were making the pastry, everything needed to be cold. But for something like this, having things room temperature is really helpful. So the rest of the ingredients are a cup of sugar, so that was 3 beaten eggs, and then that lovely Karo syrup. And when you look at that stuff coming out, see, it's coming out pretty easy. And one of the little tricks that you can do, that I do, is I spray it with like the vegetable spray, like one of the brand names is Pam. Anyway, so it comes out pretty easily if you do that. And again, I had the mise en place thing going on here where I had everything together. If I hadn't done that for you all, you'd be super bored watching me get everything ready. Here's the 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. Here's the 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And I did leave my melted butter right over here. And that is important. It just adds a richness that is needed in the pie. And it'll start out being kind of stiff. You know, I'm using a balloon whisk here. And it'll start out being a little bit stiff. But it'll come together pretty easily. As you can see, it's coming together. An optional thing that you could add at this point would be bourbon or chocolate. There are a lot of people that make chocolate pecan pies. I personally like the traditional, but this, you know, is something that you could consider doing. If you do put bourbon in, I'd use a decent one, like Maker's Mark, a Jack Daniels, something like that. So this is already really blended together. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab that pie crust again. And then I have my 2 cups of pecans here, 1 of the pecan pieces, and then 1 of the pecan halves. And I'm just going to go ahead and pour this on top. And as this cooks, I promise, as it cooks, they're already starting to come to the top, but the pecans will come to the top. You don't have to do anything about that. It's going to go ahead and do what it's supposed to do. And then I'm going to just go ahead and scrape out as much as I can with my spatula. This is my mother's recipe, by the way, and it was easy for me to do because I had it memorized from watching her do it so many times over the years. So, you know, as you can see, it's already starting to come to the top there. So I'm going to put this in the oven at 375 for 15 minutes, and then it needs to go an additional 30 to 45 minutes at 325. You want to reduce that temperature. So it's done, and I think I mentioned it, it's done when you put a knife in and you pull it out, and there may be a few little bits of the custard on the knife. And it may be slightly soft in the center. You don't want to overcook it because then, you know, the pie wouldn't be tender. What I'm going to do with the other pie crust that I have is I'm going to bake that with some cinnamon sugar on it so that I can show you in the finished product how flaky this turns out. And we'll probably do that in a separate video because we're not smart enough yet to figure out how to use the video editing. I know a lot of the bloggers are much more experienced and they've figured that all out. But later on this evening, we'll show you the finished product. And that's the recipe. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll show you that pie a little bit later. Thanks.